What if the most powerful version of you isn't loud? What if the version of you that changes everything isn't the one everyone sees, but the one you're building in silence when no one's clapping, no one's watching, and no one even knows it's happening? What if the real reason you feel stuck isn't because you're not good enough, but because you keep trying to prove yourself to people who were never meant to see your process? You scroll through their wins, their highlights, their success stories, but when was the last time you went all in on your own? Not for approval, not for applause, but because deep down you knew it was time. In a world obsessed with exposure, have you forgotten how to evolve without attention? Have you gotten so used to being seen that you stop building when no one's looking? This video isn't about motivation. It's not about performance. It's about becoming. It's about remembering that the quiet moments, those 5 a.m. alarms, those private breakthroughs, those lonely reps when you almost quit are where your next evolution is born. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you created something so pure, so real, so relentless, you didn't even need to announce it? When was the last time you put your head down, shut the noise off, and just became the person you know you're supposed to be? Because the truth is, the strongest version of you doesn't need to be advertised. It just needs to be activated. Not by likes, not by followers, but by you. Let's talk about what it really means to build yourself quietly. You ever notice how the world rewards the loudest person in the room? The one who posts every step, updates every move, announces every breath like it's breaking news. But let me ask you, since when did being seen become more valuable than becoming strong? Since when did silence mean weakness? Maybe that's what they want you to believe. Maybe they want you to think that if you're not announcing it, it's not real. That if you're not posting it, it doesn't count. But that's a lie. Because the most powerful things you'll ever build in your life, your discipline, your mindset, your identity, don't need witnesses. They need work, real work, focused, private, sacred work. Let me tell you about a man named Jacob. Not some superhero, not a celebrity, just a regular American man from Detroit who got tired of breaking promises to himself. He was tired of talking about change, tired of chasing applause, so he disappeared quietly. No post, no speech, he just locked in. For 90 days, Jacob didn't tell a soul what he was doing. He deleted every app, woke up at 5, hit the gym, read a book a week, studied the market, rewrote his habits. He didn't ask anyone to believe in him. He just believed. And you know what happened? His mind cleared, his body changed, his bank account started moving. And the crazy part, no one noticed. Not at first, but something was growing beneath the surface, strong, deep, unshakable. Because silence gave him something noise never could: ownership, control, peace. That's the new reason for silence. It's not hiding, it's protecting, it's preparation. It's how you build your foundation without critics weighing in, without doubters planting seeds of confusion, without people who don't understand your vision pulling you off track. Because here's the truth, most people are too afraid to face the moment you expose your dream too early. You put it on the table for opinions, for rejection, for decay. And every time you explain what you're doing to someone who hasn't earned the right to hear it, you lose power. So you want to know what silence really is. It's not just a lack of noise, it's a declaration. It's you saying, I don't need to be seen to be serious. It's you reclaiming your time, your thoughts, your energy. But let me ask you something, and I want you to feel this. How much of your potential have you given away just by explaining yourself to the wrong people? How many times have you slowed down just to make others comfortable with the pace of your transformation? How many times have you posted your progress hoping someone would validate the very thing you should have been validating yourself? You see, this is the trap. They don't talk about the performance trap, where you feel like you have to keep proving, showing broadcasting just to feel like you're doing enough. And if you're not careful, you become addicted to it. Addicted to feedback, addicted to claps, addicted to approval, and slowly you stop building. You stop listening to that voice inside that says, keep going. You start looking outward when all your power lives inward. That's why the most dangerous man in the room is the one who doesn't talk about what he's building. Because you can't distract him. You can't question what you don't see. You can't sabotage what's not exposed. And when he finally shows up, there's nothing left to argue, just results. So let me warn you, don't confuse silence with stillness. Don't mistake privacy for passivity, because the man who's quiet isn't sleeping. He's sculpting, he's sharpening, he's preparing a version of himself the world won't be ready for. And when that version emerges, there won't be a need for announcement. The presence will speak. The transformation will speak. The energy will be undeniable. This is where you pivot. This is where you choose power over performance. This is where you stop explaining your process and start embodying your progress. So here's the truth. Silence is the new standard. Privacy is the new power. You don't need the world to understand your every move. You need to understand that every move you make without noise is a deposit into your future strength, into your discipline, into your legacy. The old you may have needed permission, may have needed feedback, may have needed likes, but not anymore. Not this version. From here on out, your silence will speak louder than any speech ever could. So build alone if you have to, quietly, consistently, relentlessly. And one day when the results are undeniable, when your life screams what your words never said, then and only then will they understand what you have been doing this whole time. But by then, it'll be too late for them to catch up. That's the power of building yourself quietly. What if I told you the reason you're exhausted isn't because you're doing too much, but because you're leaking energy in places that give you nothing back? What if your dreams aren't dying from lack of time or talent, but from energy? Theft disguised as normal life. In this world, your energy is your most valuable currency. Not money, not status, not hours. Because with energy, you can rebuild anything. Without it, even the clearest vision fades into fog. Let me tell you about Sarah. She was sharp-driven, hungry, but always tired. She kept wondering why she couldn't stay consistent, why her motivation vanished by noon, why her mind felt scattered, until one day her mentor said, track your energy, like you track your money. So she did. She tracked everything, every conversation, every scroll, every thought loop, and what she found shocked her. She wasn't just tired, she was drained, not by work, but by noise, by people who expected everything and gave nothing, by the need to respond to every message, by the unspoken pressure to stay, visible, liked, connected. And that realization hit hard. She didn't need more coffee, she needed boundaries. Because clarity doesn't come from thinking harder. It comes from protecting your mind, like it's sacred ground. So, let me ask you, how much energy are you losing? Explaining yourself to people who don't even hear you. How much are you giving to distractions, habits, and environments that feed your fatigue and starve your focus? This is the emotional peak. Listen close. You cannot rise if you're constantly being pulled in 1,000 directions. You cannot evolve if your spirit is being bled by tiny interruptions that look like nothing until they have taken everything. This is the silent killer of transformation, the unnoticed thief. And if you don't get ruthless about protecting your energy, you will stay stuck in cycles that look like effort but lead nowhere. So what's the move? You simplify, you say no, you stop negotiating with energy thieves, you stop justifying your fatigue, you become unavailable for anything that doesn't build you. Because from now on, your energy is sacred. You guard it, you direct it, you multiply it. And when you do, something wild happens. Your power returns quietly, consistently, and all at once. That's the real shift. That's what changes everything. Not doing more, but leaking less. Not chasing time, but protecting the fire. This is your energy economy. Manage it like your future depends on it, because it does. Discipline isn't built in daylight, it's forged in the dark, in the hours no one claps for, in the quiet corners of your life that never make it to the screen. And if you don't understand this, you'll keep confusing excitement for transformation. And that's how most people lose the war before it even starts. Because excitement fades, but discipline stays when the lights go out, when no one's watching, when nothing feels magical and everything feels hard. And that's exactly where the real ones are made, not through hype, but through habit, not through feeling ready, but through moving anyway. And I want to tell you about Marcus, a guy who used to chase motivation like it was fuel, a man who started 100 things and finished none, until he realized his life wasn't falling apart. It was just undisciplined, scattered, reactive. So one day he changed, and it wasn't some dramatic movie moment. No, it was a small, brutal choice at 5:17 a.m. in the middle of winter in upstate New York. Alarm buzzing, bed, warm sky black, and that voice in his head whispering, skip today. But something in him whispered louder, no, this is the rep that makes you. And he got up, not because it felt good, but because it was time to become someone new. And that right there, that moment of unseen work, that's the seed of a new identity, because discipline isn't an act, it's an agreement, a ritual, a line you draw between who you've been and who you refuse to be anymore. So let me ask you, what ritual are you keeping when no one's keeping score? What standard are you holding when the mood is gone? Because the truth is, your next level isn't hiding in a breakthrough. It's hiding in your repetition, in the things you don't skip, in the work you do when no one's asking. And here's your warning. The world will hand you 1,000 excuses to settle. And if you don't have a non-negotiable ritual, you will break under the pressure of convenience, and you'll call it bad luck. But it was just a lack of structure, because your ritual is your rescue, your discipline is your defense, and the time is coming when the only thing that separates you from who you used to be is the system you refuse to break. So now ask yourself, what would change if you built your days like a temple, where every rep, every routine, every decision was sacred? Because once you treat your ritual like a religion, your results become undeniable. And that's when everything changes, not because you forced it, but because you finally became consistent enough to deserve it. There comes a point in your life when the old version of you is no longer just uncomfortable, it becomes unbearable, and not because you hate who you are, but because you finally catch a glimpse of who you could be if you stopped carrying the weight of your past identity. And that shift doesn't happen in public. It happens in private, in quiet decisions and unseen moments where you choose the future version of yourself over the familiar echo of who you've always been. And I want to tell you about a man named David, an average guy working a job he didn't love, living on autopilot, drifting in routines that numbed his potential, until one night he sat in his car outside the gym, engine running, hands frozen on the wheel, mind racing with doubt, and something inside him cracked. Not in anger, but in truth, because he realized he wasn't failing because he was incapable. He was failing because he kept showing up as the man he was tired of being. And in that moment, David made a quiet vow. I don't need a crowd, I need a new code. And that's what a private identity shift is. It's not loud, it's not flashy, it's not announced with fireworks. It's a quiet rebellion against the habits, thoughts and beliefs that have held you hostage. It's looking in the mirror and saying, I've outgrown this version of me. So let me ask you, who are you pretending to still be just because it's comfortable? Who are you carrying that was never meant to walk into your future? Because here's the warning, if you don't rewire your mindset in private, your environment will keep wiring you in reverse. And one day you'll look up and wonder how you got so far from who you could have become. That's why identity work is sacred, because once you stop repeating your past, you start rewriting your future. But it takes silence, it takes stillness. It takes intentional mental rewiring when no one's validating your change, because transformation isn't recognized right away. It's felt internally before it's ever confirmed externally. And the mistake most people make is they wait for proof before they commit. But the ones who rise, they commit before the evidence shows up. They act as if trained, as if speak, as if until one day they are. So hear me when I say this, your identity isn't built in the spotlight. It's built in the shadows of your new decisions, your new standards, your new thoughts, repeated in silence until they become your default settings. And if you want a breakthrough, it won't come from who you are. It will come from the version of you that's waiting to be chosen. So choose now, not when it's comfortable, but because it's time. And when you do, the world won't need an explanation. They'll feel the shift the moment you walk into the room, not because you told them, but because you've become undeniable. There's a moment on this journey that no one warns you about, a moment when the excitement is gone. The support fades and your progress goes unnoticed by the world, and it hits harder than you expect because you're doing everything right. Showing up every day, sacrificing comfort, ignoring distractions, building in silence, and yet no one claps, no one calls, no one says, keep going. And that's when the real test begins. Not in your body, not in your talent, but in your mind. Because doubt doesn't show up when you're weak. It shows up when you're doing the work and no one's watching it. Creeps in with questions like, does any of this even matter? Am I actually making progress? What if I'm just wasting time? I want to introduce you to someone named Chris, a 32-year-old from Chicago who walked away from a stable job to pursue his dream of building a brand that mattered. He didn't tell anyone at first. He just started waking up early, studying late. Working while others rested, he poured everything he had into this vision. Months passed, his life was changing. His habits were strong, his ideas were sharp, but still silence, no validation, no recognition. Just a quiet room, a laptop screen, and the sound of his own heartbeat, questioning if he made the right choice. And that's when it hit him, not in a flash of motivation, but in a painful stillness, that this moment, this void of applause, was the actual battlefield of greatness. Because here's what no one tells you: if you only keep going, when people cheer, You're not disciplined. You're addicted to approval and success. Won't come to someone who stops when the world goes silent. It only comes to the one who builds when it's quiet, walks forward when it's lonely, believes when there's no confirmation. And this is where most people quit. Not because they couldn't do it, but because they misunderstood the silence. They thought silence meant failure, when in reality, silence is feedback. It's the universe asking, will you build without applause? Will you keep going without recognition? Will you trust the process without needing proof? So let me ask you, how much of your effort have you abandoned just because no one clapped for you? How many dreams have you delayed because they didn't get instant validation? You must understand this. The applause you're waiting for, it comes after the finish line, not during the training. And if you expect celebration at every step, you'll lose the strength required to complete the race, because every great chapter in your life will start in isolation. You will be doubted, overlooked, misunderstood, and that's not the problem. That's the price. And here's the emotional peak. You don't need an audience to be great. You need alignment. You need consistency. You need the kind of grit that keeps building when everyone else is watching someone louder. And that's the danger of modern life. It rewards noise over progress, visibility over value, attention over authenticity. But don't fall for it. Don't trade the future you're building for applause you haven't earned yet. Chris didn't quit. He kept building, and after a year, one full year of no claps, no congratulations, no public approval, he launched and everything changed. Not because he got lucky, but because he got quiet and stayed consistent. And now people ask him how he did it, and he smiles, because they'll never understand the lonely nights, the silent sacrifices, the internal battles it took to stay in the game. That's what makes the win feel different. It wasn't handed, it was earned in silence. So if you're in that space right now, if you're tired, doubting, wondering if anyone will ever notice good, stay there, because that's where your edge is built. That's where you become resilient, refined, unshakable. And the ones who keep going there, who build even when the room is quiet, they're the ones who rise in a way no one can ignore. So here's your transition. Stop measuring your growth by who's clapping. Start measuring it by who you're becoming when no one's watching, because when the noise fades and the spotlight moves, on all that remains is the work you kept doing, the discipline you refused to abandon, and the belief you cultivated when no one else believed yet. And that is where your power comes from. Not applause, but identity. Not attention, but alignment. Not noise, but quiet mastery. And one day, when the world finally sees you, they won't realize you've been preparing for this moment in silence all along. They'll just feel the weight of your presence, and they'll know, without you saying a word, you built it when no one was clapping. Everyone talks about the big moves, the bold risks, the massive changes. But the truth is, the people who build real fortune don't rise from what they do. Occasionally they rise from what they do quietly, daily, religiously. And if you study anyone who's built something great, you'll find a pattern, a system of small sacred habits done when no one's watching. And I'm not talking about the viral morning routines or staged hustle clips. I'm talking about the kind of habits that change your wiring. And I want to tell you about Lauren, a 35-year-old single mom from Texas who built a 6-figure copywriting business in 2 years. Not from ads, not from networking events, not from flashy posts, but from quiet rituals that no one saw coming every day. She woke up at 4:45 a.m., not to post about it, but to prime her mind in silence. Before her son woke up, before the emails, before the world demanded her attention, she practiced what she called a quiet hour, just her a journal. And the discipline to focus inward before moving outward. She wrote down 5 things she was grateful for. Not generic surface level gratitude, but deep reflections that grounded her in reality and sharpened her sense of what mattered. Then she'd map out her one critical task, not a to-do list, just one move that would build her future, and she protected that time, like her life depended on it, because it did. And here's the turning point. These habits didn't make noise, but they compounded powerfully over weeks. Her confidence grew over months. Her skill set sharpened, and over a year, her income exploded. Not because she announced her moves, but because she aligned her life around them. So let me ask you, what quiet rituals do you have in place that are quietly building your fortune? Or are you still depending on bursts of motivation and waiting for the perfect moment? Here's the truth you need to feel in your bones. Fortune isn't built in motivation. It's built in ritual, And if you don't anchor your day in habits that move the needle, you'll keep drifting into distraction dressed as productivity. So let's go deeper if you really want to elevate your life. Start auditing your mornings. Do you reach for your phone or for your focus? Do you begin with someone else's life on your screen or with your own vision on paper? Because those first 15 minutes shape your entire nervous system. And those who win long term are those who treat their mornings like sacred ground. Lauren had another rule: 90 minutes of focused work before checking messages. She called it her vault time, and during those 90 minutes she built proposals, studied sales psychology, wrote pitches, and trained her mind to delay dopamine until after execution. That's another powerful habit. Delayed dopamine. Most people can't win because they reward themselves before they've earned it. They scroll for validation before they've built anything to be validated. And this is where the quiet habits separate the average from the exceptional. So what else? She created a habit called evening review. 10 minutes to reflect on the day, what worked, what didn't, what to shift tomorrow, not as a punishment, but as alignment. And by doing this, she kept course correcting faster than most people even realize. They're lost. And here's the emotional peak. The most dangerous thing in your life isn't failure. It's drifting, going through your days without intentional rhythm and waking up 5 years from now wondering where your potential went. So here's your warning. If you don't build your life on quiet, consistent rituals, it will be built by default, by distraction, by the loud voices that have no idea where you're going. And when that happens, you don't just lose time, you lose identity. But if you build your days with intention, if you master a handful of quiet compounding habits that sharpen your focus, protect your energy, and move your life 1 inch forward, each day you become unstoppable, not overnight, but inevitably, because that's how fortune is really built, not in big leaps, but in small silent steps that no one sees until the results can no longer be ignored. So now the question is, what habits will you practice in silence that one day makes so much noise you never have to explain yourself again? Because that day is coming, and when it does, the world won't remember the noise you didn't make. They'll remember the empire you quietly built while they were still distracted. There's a moment on the path that changes everything, not because someone gave you a shot, not because a door opened, not because the world finally saw you, but because you became undeniable. And no one saw it coming, no announcement, no confetti, no big reveal, just you walking into the room with a different presence, and the energy shifts before you speak because the quiet season has done its work. And now you don't even need to explain. I want to tell you about Anthony, a guy from Newark who used to crave being seen, always trying to prove himself, dropping hints about his goals, hoping someone would notice the work he was doing behind the scenes. And when they didn't, he questioned everything. Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I should stop. Maybe I'm invisible. But what Anthony didn't know was that visibility wasn't the problem. Premature exposure was he was still building the roots, and the world only sees the tree, never the seed. So one day he made a choice: no more announcements, no more updates, just results. And for months he went dark, silent mornings, locked in routines, discipline without applause. And here's what shifted. He stopped trying to be impressive and started becoming powerful. Not in the way people think, but in the way that builds character, when no one's clapping. And that's where the transformation began. Not when the world saw him, but when he no longer needed to be seen. Because here's the truth, most people miss. Your rise won't come with warning signs. It won't come with flashing lights. It won't come when you're comfortable. Your rise will come when your habits have outgrown your history, when your mindset no longer fits your old limitations, and when your results start entering rooms before your name does. But here's the part that no one likes to hear. You have to endure the season of being unnoticed, because that's the season where your edge is built. And that's not just motivational, that's spiritual, because every version of greatness is born in silence. So let me ask you something. Can you keep showing up when no one's validating you? Can you keep building when your progress is invisible? Can you keep believing when the world thinks you've disappeared? Because that's the moment where most people give up. Not when it gets hard, but when it gets quiet. When the noise fades and the likes stop and you're left with just yourself and the mirror. That's the test, and here's the warning. If you don't pass that test, you'll stay stuck in cycles that recycle potential but never birth power, because the rise without announcement is reserved for those who stay committed in the shadows, who learned how to shine without a spotlight, who didn't beg to be seen but built to be undeniable. And when you reach that point, and you won't walk into rooms trying to prove your worth. You'll walk in and they'll feel you, not because you're loud, but because you're real, not because you rehearsed it, but because you lived it, and the shift will be undeniable. Your posture, your tone, your silence, it all speaks. And that's when you know you've made it, not when they finally clap, but when you don't need them to. And that's the rise you're chasing, the rise that can't be bought, faked or rushed, the rise that doesn't ask for permission. It earns its place through relentless private work. And when it shows up, it doesn't knock, it walks in like it belongs. So keep going and stop looking over your shoulder, waiting for applause, because the most powerful rise is the one that doesn't announce itself. It reveals itself fully formed, fully certain, fully unstoppable. If this woke something up in you, it's time to stop waiting for permission, time to stop chasing recognition, time to stop looking for validation from a world that doesn't know your vision, because what you're building isn't meant to be loud, it's meant to be legendary, and legends aren't built through noise, they're built through discipline, through repetition, through silence. This isn't about going viral, this is about going inward, this is about building something so real, so undeniable, so deeply rooted that when the world finally sees it, they can't look away. And if you felt forgotten, overlooked, unseen, I want you to understand something clearly. That means your power hasn't been diluted yet, your energy hasn't been scattered yet, your voice hasn't been shaped by someone else's approval, and that means you're still in control. This is your moment to double down on the quiet path, to choose mastery over performance, to choose patience over pressure, to choose process over applause. And it starts with a decision, not a grand announcement, not a fancy strategy, just one final moment of clarity that says, I'm done performing, I'm done explaining, I'm done needing to be seen, I'm here to become. So from this moment forward, every silent rep counts, every early morning, every focused hour, every ignored distraction, every time you resist the urge to show the world what you're doing before it's fully formed. Every time you stay locked in instead of logging on, that is you building something no one can take away from you. So I want you to write it in the comments right now. I build in silence, not for the algorithm, not for the crowd, but for the future version of me who will one day stand in a room and not need to say a word, because the work will speak for me. The energy will be undeniable. The presence will say everything. If this message reached you, if it hit something inside your gut, then don't let it fade. When the video ends, don't just feel inspired. Act inspired, change something, refine something, recommit to something, because this is your blueprint. Now this is the moment. The quiet becomes sacred, and the silence becomes a signal that says, I'm no longer waiting to be chosen. I've chosen myself. I'm no longer updating the world on every move. I'm building moves too big to hide. And if you're walking this path with me, if you're ready to build the version of you that no longer needs to be introduced, then subscribe, not for entertainment, but for alignment, not for hype, but for direction. Because this journey we're on isn't for the distracted, it's for the disciplined. And we're only just getting started. You're not here by accident. You're here because something inside of you knows the truth, that the quiet work is the real work, and it's time to go all in on it. This is your new standard, your new identity, your new season. And it's not for show, it's for substance. It's not to be seen, it's to become now. Close your eyes for just 5 seconds and see that version of you, calm, certain, built from effort. No one saw standing tall, not because they were applauded, but because they stayed committed when no one clapped. That's your future, and it starts now. Comment, I build in silence. Subscribe to join this journey of mastery. And remember, this is not the end. This is the foundation. We're going deeper. We're getting sharper. We're becoming undeniable, silently, powerfully, and permanently.